What's up, y'all? See? I told y'all I'd be back faster this time. And I ain't tell no lies. We here. It's like 3 weeks later. It's your boy, Mars Hogan, the something cinema guy. I'm going to come up with a successful hooky tagline one of these videos, I promise, but not today. And we're here, back again with another video on the channel, and I'm super excited to tap back in with y'all and keep this thing moving. I like to start by saying, yo, thank y'all for the love on that last video. Like, the views went crazy, at least compared to my other stuff, and I truly appreciate that. Like, for real, it means so much. And honestly, that's why I wanted to come back so quick. I felt inspired by that. I felt energized and just really engaged again. So thank you all for that, for whoever out there watched. Now, if we could get those comments going crazy, I will have no complaints at all. Comments are like the life force for this type of content because conversation is super important in what the videos I make are about, especially a breakdown like the last one. But thank y'all again. You know, it's a lot of views for me, maybe not for a lot of other people, but I am so appreciative. And with the feedback on the breakdown video, by the way, this one is going to be in that similar vein. It may just be a little bit shorter, a little different perspective, but I like to have a conversation on a single film again because y'all seem to like that, and I really enjoyed it. But before I get into that, man, y'all know what's up. Ain't nothing changed. Like, comment. Yes, you right there listening now. Keep on listening to the video until the end and drop a comment. Yes, you. And then subscribe if this content is your jam. Let your boy know. And as always, all the necessary handles are to the side right here or here, wherever I decide to put them. But yeah, follow me on all of that, wherever y'all are at. Let's be there together. You feel me? All right, cool. Let's jump right in. It's in the title, y'all know what we're here for, and it's to talk about the horror phenomenon that has taken over the summer, Osgood Perkins' Longlegs. It came out mid-July and has been the talk of the town even before that because of the stellar marketing campaign that the film utilized in promotion. And that's a big part of the conversation of what the actual film does spectacularly as you're watching it. And it is one word that encompasses it for me, that word being tone. Okay, so Longlegs is a psychological thriller that follows a young woman FBI agent as she blows open a case of murders that were long thought to have gone cold. And this film follows this journey to find and understand the serial killer named Longlegs. It's very much so a disturbing, twisty thriller with a dark crime background. I'm going to get into how I felt about the movie a bit later because I didn't think it was the greatest thing I've ever seen, which is completely okay, it's still a very good movie, but what I thought it had was an extremely strong presence, which has resulted in the impressive impact it's had for audiences. This movie, on a less than $10 million budget, marketing included in that figure, grossed over double that in its first weekend with $22 million. That's crazy, like for a lot of reasons. One, because a sub $10 million movie is pretty low budget. Throw in the fact that included marketing that was super strategically valuable. Two, doubling your budget, regardless of what it is, for your movie in the first week is an extreme financial success, especially in today's day and age with the loss of the movie-going experience and the faltering of big studio investment in smaller original projects. Even though we're talking about Neon here, and they are one of the best when it comes to original ideas, especially on the horror side. And three, Longlegs made more in one weekend than arguably Neon's most critically acclaimed film, The Monumental Parasite. And it has made more in that 1 week than in Parasite's entire theatrical run in the US, just in the US. This to me is directly driven by the impressive use of tone in the promoting and building of this film. I remember the first images that I saw to promote Longlegs like it was yesterday. I was on Twitter, I believe, and there was some raspy 911 call being played over a picture of a family.
911, what's your emergency?
It's my daughter.
creepy is that? And you got the title at the end, or at least what you would assume was the title, because it was in some of what we know now as the Longlegs symbolism. This is marketing perfection. And the fact that I even remember it that clearly now is exactly why, because that was like last year. It was haunting, it was unsettling, it was disturbing. It sticks with you, sticks in your mind well after it passes. Like, what the hell did I just watch, and what is it about? Outside of it coming from Neon, you could have easily believed that you were watching something real, something from true crime. And I think Longlegs finds a ton of success here by leaning into that aesthetic and the familiarity of that feeling through their promotions. We're gonna jump around a bit here, but fast forward to the actual release of the movie. With that comes an influx of me before Longlegs, me after Longlegs, kind of like content where you see people looking normal, looking fine, and then looking distraught at the end. And this enhances the sense of not only fear, but curiosity into what the movie has in store for audiences. It's a perfect way to kind of express what the experience is like without really revealing anything. This parlays to me into the trailer that shows Micah Monroe in her first scene Nicolas Cage's Longlegs, and they use her heartbeat as a baseline for people to understand how frightening and disturbing the character really is.
Action.
They do a great job of making the fear and creepiness palpable without you even having to walk into a theater, setting an extremely strong tonal message that has a number of different connection points and makes you settle into the dread that this movie induces. It just adds to that unnatural fear of who, or even worse, what is Longlegs. Now the actual film. Spoilers to follow, so you've been warned. The cold open, the oldest trick in the books, but this one is particularly impactful. It's this white winter wonderland, but it doesn't feel like that at all. In fact, it is extremely haunting and empty. The flat color of white makes the space feel endless, even when it's couched in the smaller one-to-one frame on screen. This is in some ways a vast liminal space, unsettling in itself. The absence of life and the absence of color gives a strong sense of vulnerability and unease. And when Longlegs pulls up, he makes it no better by also being all white in the face in his attire like a ghost. His figure being outside of the frame the entire time into the last split second produces this sense of dread and anxiety, and our minds automatically want to fill in that missing information, and it gets your mind just running. And with everything else already being creepy, with everything tonally leading up to this being disturbing, what becomes top of mind is that same kind of imagery and those ideas. So that dread is persisting, that discomfort is long lasting as we go through the first scene. And that is consistent for this film. It never really allows you to get comfortable. Every scene is either grainy and dark or artificially warm. There's major contrast with a lot of what we see outside versus once scenes go inside, especially early on in the movie. With the backdrop of Satanism and the devil being the dark aura of the film, it makes sense that all of the warm scenes feel less warm and more hot, like hell. That's how I felt watching it. I think we get a good number of relatively harsh oranges and reds that inhabit a bunch of different scenes, like early in the film when Micah Monroe's Lee Harker is laying down in the room looking through the crime photos. The color choice to me felt deliberately bloody almost, in the same way that Longlegs' writing is blood red, and in the same way that we have a couple of cuts to black that are actually cuts to red. And these are some of the more in-our-face connections and representations of the demonic nature fostered in this film, but there are more subtle touches as well. When I saw Longlegs in theaters, something felt very off to me about the whole thing. I spoke with my wife about it as we watched, and by the time we got about halfway through, I finally realized what it was. Framing. So many frames had attention placed in the direct middle of the frame, like this frame, or this one, or this one. It's so many to choose from, honestly. It's probably at least like 90% of the movie. Maybe not exactly, but close enough. If you watch a lot of movies, you'll notice how abnormal that is, and how even more abnormal it is to have almost an entire movie to be center framed in this way. It's also called one-point perspective, and it's usually used to just call attention to something. However, it can also be utilized as a tactic of isolating the frame. It's like a trapping of sorts, a cinematic technique that makes the frame feel inescapable. This, for me, even before I noticed it, made me feel a strong sense of discomfort in watching this film, which I definitely believe was deliberate. These are especially used in their strongest sense with scenes featuring Lee Harker, like in the numerous tracking scenes where we're following behind her as she moves through space on the screen. She moves and we move with her, but she never leaves her locked off position in the center. Another elevation of this framing is the use of the frame within a frame technique, where we have the frame that we see, like the screen, and then in the scene there is a smaller space cut off by something. Take a look at this image. You can literally feel this sort of barricade that is the box of the mirror. The figure inside is completely and utterly trapped with no means of escaping their fate. There's a number of different, very wide angles used in order to kind of enhance the idea of space, but it also is twofold in enhancing the isolation and the fact that whoever is in the frame is in a very big box. This, compounded with the center framing, makes for a very walled off structure that almost gets claustrophobic. And by the way, where do boxes come into place in this film with the dolls? More on that later. On top of this, there are those specific scenes where we follow her into things, which enhances that feeling of experiencing something with the character that they themselves are unable to see coming, and we as audiences share in that. There's also the flip side, of which we see Lee from the front as she comes upon something, like in the scene where she encounters Longlegs for the first time. This is a tactic I was first introduced to by Stanley Kubrick in The Shining, where we see our characters reacting to something before we see what they see. This thus enhances our anxiety and our dread as we watch them try to cope with what they're seeing. It's super impactful in driving home that unsettling and disturbing tone to its peak, especially after Longlegs begins to bang his head on the table. This is gruesome, but what's even more is seeing Lee's horror in response. Think the scene with her at the window as well. The horror that is on her face. We don't exactly know what she's seeing, but we live in that dread with her by being subjected to seeing her expression. I love the camera angles and positioning as storytelling devices, and that's not all. Sound also plays a crucial role, as it does in most horrors and thrillers, to help set an eerie tone. There's a large contrast between the sound used and the actual vocals at times, like when thinking of all the singing scenes with Longlegs or any of the scenes with his voice. The singing often becomes a piercing drone by the end, and it starts only being backed by the kind of surrounding reverb and echo of his voice. Singing aside, this offers again another aspect to the empty, sort of liminal, uncomfortable space around him, thinking specifically when he interacts with young Lee out in the snow. Even though there's no singing in the store scene where he talks to the young woman attendant, there's still the presence of a lack of sound. And with this, we get to hear all of the little weird nuances of the voice Nicolas Cage created for the character. The weird breathing, the kind of sickly, drab tone of speech that kind of drags across your ears. It's this kind of wobbly, nasty tone of voice that is just really odd. It hits the ear bad. It's the same thing when he lets out those blood-curdling screams in the car. The choice of using those hard E words is particularly important in being able to drag out that kind of nail-scratching vocal octave. effective. If anything, it makes you as an audience kind of want to squirm in your seat. It induces a sort of like scratch at the back of your neck. It works really well in that way, and our discomfort is fixated at the forefront of every moment of this film and enhanced by all of its different elements. The background sound is typically just a haunting sort of dust on the wind kind of feeling, just to foster a sense of tension. Also, and this is like super creepy to me, but has anyone taken a look at the soundtrack for this movie? Let me just read you off a couple song names, okay? Hell on Earth, Blood Trees, The Horns, Initiation, Bible Leaves and the FBI, and there's more. Like, there are so much more. The names themselves aren't really a part of the movie, like inside it, but the fact that these songs are called this just makes you kind of feel like the creepiness is all the more real and just adds to the overall lore of the film. That's actually a good word, lore. This film has a really strong lore, and I think that ultimately has driven it to have so much success. All the elements of it, big or small, inside of the movie or outside of it, add to the tone that they're trying to put out, and you really get to kind of take the experience with you, for better or for worse, or attach yourself to it in ways that are outside of the film, making it way more palpable, making it way more IRL. Now, there's also a lot of imagery on screen that just is kind of there but not drawn attention to. All of the horned devil like shadowy figures that lie in wait in the back of a ton of different frames. If you pay close attention to the shadows, it feels like you're always seeing something throughout this movie. And that is something that feels extremely purposeful, especially given the premise of Longlegs and the devil's kind of presence being in certain spaces, or really being ever present. And when you think about it as it refers to Lee, it almost makes sense when it's revealed that Longlegs was literally in her basement throughout her childhood. He was always there, always present, and even after death, his satanic presence carries on through the dolls. Dolls, not to mention, can be extremely creepy within themselves. I didn't really mention it because it's kind of the obvious device here and very in your face, like prevalent in the movie, but that doesn't change the fact that they serve the purpose of keeping with the creepy tone very well, as opposed to another medium of carrying out these crimes, or carrying out the devil's work, rather. That is intensified by the dolls having the faces of the young girls that are subject to Longlegs' demonic possession of their families. You can't look at those dolls, but you also can't look away when they're on screen. It's fully and unequivocally disturbing because of how it is an innocent, almost childlike object being used and abused for the most sinister, most despicable of acts. And like I mentioned earlier, these dolls obviously are gonna come in a box, and that in of itself makes sense, but in the narrative, we see it further played out in imagery like this, where it's not a physical box, but one that we see visually, and again is another representation of there being no escape for these girls that Longlegs is preying on. They are completely vulnerable, completely blocked off. The dolls are a brilliant choice and a brilliant illustration of this narrative of the innocence that Longlegs steals and taints. Now, all of these things for me fall under the umbrella of tone. All of these are related to that through cinematography, character choices, sound design, setting, all that good stuff. And I think all of that is fantastic, and it does a great job of getting across the feeling that the movie is definitely trying to push, but it's outside of that where the film falls a bit short for me. Speaking with my friends, there was the question of, was this even really a horror, or if it was just a psychological thriller? I lean completely towards the latter because the movie is unsettling, but all in all, it's really not that scary. And I think the downfall of this movie begins with what made it so impressive in the first place, the hype around what it would be. For a few weeks now, it's been nothing but 10 out of 10, the best horror of the year, the movie of the summer, and just an extreme fervor surrounding the film and its release. It within itself compares itself to movies the likes of Seven, Cure, and Silence of the Lambs. And while it draws greatly from that ilk, it is far and away from those movies, unfortunately. And even further from being perfect, because those movies aren't even perfect. I think I've given Silence of the Lambs a near perfect 9 out of 10. 7 and 8 out of 10, I can't really remember. but I know I liked it. And Cure, well, that's just been on my list forever, and I still have to find somewhere to watch that. Speaking of, if anyone knows where I can see Cure, hit me up. Like, please, I really gotta see that. But anyway, this Longlegs is not that at all. And that's not me trying to say it's bad, because it most certainly is not bad. I give it a 6 out of 10, maybe even a 7. And that's not a bad score at all. Some people like to think that it is, but I think that 6s are, on my scale at least, worth anybody watching. It could even get a rewatch in certain circumstances. And I think I will watch this again with someone who hasn't seen it or to analyze it more. And this movie is right up my alley as the type of movie that I love to watch. That being said, it's just not perfect. And it's just not the movies that it compares itself to. And that's okay. Let's start with this, right? For all of the weird oddness that is Nicolas Cage in this film, and for how creepy he is at times, you pull away from the tone a bit and you realize how laughable some of the moments are. The singing sets a certain tone, but when you really think about it, it's just kind of silly, honestly. Like, now it's this trend on TikTok, and it's keeping a bit of the creepiness going because it does look weird seeing people do the little, thing. But it is ultimately more funny to me than terror-inducing when I really think about it. A lot of the actions of Longlegs are like this when you actually watch the movie. Not the trailer, but the movie. In the trailer, the that moment in the store is much more horrifying because you get a glimpse of it to the point where you can't really even make out the figure, and that terribly disturbing kind of digitized screaming tone behind it. That hits in that moment. But in the actual movie, you sit on this man flapping his hands over his eyes, and while still weird, it's nowhere near as fear-inducing. And this, to me, cripples the movie in a way because the antagonist isn't as daunting as he feels in the trailers. He's more silly than sinister. And I think how they present Nicolas Cage is also flawed. The first scene where he dips and we see his face for a split second, that's really good stuff. That's really disturbing. And on that note, the movie starts off phenomenal, but I have to digress. Later, when we get the reveal to Lee, the one used in the trailer to say Micah Monroe's heartbeat went through the roof from seeing Nicolas Cage for the first time, that scene in the movie is just very underwhelming. We see this weird, dirty, pale looking man who looks like he's had too much work done on his face, which is purposeful, yes, but doesn't successfully carry on the hype that has been centered around him from before the movie released and through all the scenes prior to this one. It falls flat to me, especially after kind of feeling less and less impacted by Longlegs' presence as he continues to show up on screen. This is what makes for a real setback in my opinion, because the fear is centered around a character that doesn't continually induce it throughout the movie. A small point here, but I was super thrown off by the dialogue as well. A lot of very dry, very reading the script type of dialogue came through the film, especially at the start. I think it makes a bit of sense for Monroe's very awkward Lee character, but not for the others. They tell a lot of the action and a lot of the thoughts as opposed to showing and expressing these different concepts and ideas in the visual format. I particularly didn't like that scene where they kept saying their names. Like, it just felt like unnecessary and fluffed up to me. I don't know, like it didn't really vibe with me very well, But again, this movie started off absolutely perfectly. Even despite that, all the way up until after Lee's partner was killed, the tension was extremely well done and the tone of the whole thing was at its absolute peak. This was so good. But there's a point where, and I can't really remember exactly, things just kind of fall apart story-wise. Like, I think to Longlegs' capture, it just kind of happens. And I know they were kind of referencing that capture in 7, but even with that, there was the action of him being in the police office, and it was crazy in that regard. In Longlegs, there's no real connection to how they even got to him. But they just did, and that was it. We can probably infer that he got caught after the store or something, but it's very much so not even hinted towards through the story or visually on screen. That was jarring and not in the best way for me. And there are just moments where we spend a bit too much time on the what of Longlegs and not on the how of Longlegs, and in that essence, moving the story forward. I think the twist at the end, with it being Lee's mom that is Longlegs' accomplice, is nicely done. But I think the dolls and their effect feels a bit thrown together. I guess it's meant to be like supernatural, but there's nothing else in the story or in the setting that lends itself to this. And this idea that the devil made me do it is the root cause of all these crimes definitely drives us as an audience away from the key factor of the movie that we should focus on, which is Longlegs. He becomes more of a middleman, and Lee's mom is the middle woman to that middle man, and that just feels pretty jumbled and less engaging. It's like we have this off-screen big bad and the devil that is only really expressed through subtle imagery and shadows in the background. The most impactful Longlegs scene, outside of the one at the beginning of course, is when he is tying up Lee's mother in their house. He's doing something, he's acting, and it's disturbing. Outside of that, it's making dolls that then cause the actions of the film, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because that's scary too, but it just kind of boxes off these gruesome acts of violence that these families commit to a kind of trans act with no real importance or motive other than, I guess, supporting Satanism. I don't know. Maybe it's my fault that I just didn't really see the purpose in that. I did like the reveal of Lee's mother as an actor in these events, like I mentioned a minute ago, and her having to bear witness to the violence and the result on her psyche does have an impact in this kind of oh shit effect that I think is very discomforting. Another small note, I think opening the door to both Lee's birthday and Blair Underwood's daughter's birthday very close together, and around that same time also introducing the birthday connection with Longlegs felt like a bit of a misstep and kind of giving it away. If these things happen far apart, the audience may forget it and it comes back like, whoa. But since it happens relatively close together, it draws a connection to everything that really dampened the ending for me when it's revealed that Lee is the girl in the first scene. Even though, yet again, we jumped from that scene straight to her in our next scene at the start of the movie. So again, those through lines were way too close together. I think it just was a mistake to me that really took the weight away of what the story tries to drop on us as the climax at the end of the film. I think Longlegs mainly falls victim to the wildly popular marketing plan. Honestly, like, it was way too good, and it was hard for the film to live up to the tone that it set, like through and through. It's almost as if not seeing it, not knowing what was really behind the curtain, fueled the energy and the engagement of what it could have been. There were so many great promotional details that just built this movie up immensely. The phone number on the billboard that when you call, you get to hear Longlegs in that creepy voice I talked about earlier. Or the website where you literally had to kind of play the cat and mouse game of the movie itself, using it to explore the fictional family murders and sort of solve the crime or the case of Longlegs. They even put a half-page ad in the Seattle Times with the Longlegs symbols and a tagline for the movie. Like, how perfect is that? How realistic, and such a good callback to the real life Zodiac Killer and the movie Zodiac. All of that is so fantastic. So fantastic. And Longlegs starts off giving us that payoff for all the built up excitement, or just that unsettledness from the preview content. It just ultimately doesn't live up to it fully in the end, even though it is still a good movie that is most certainly worth your time. And I like to also add, this is nowhere near any shade or negativity towards the director Osgood Perkins or anyone who was involved in the making of this movie. I don't want to come off like I'm hating or just really digging into the film, because I'm not trying to do that. And like I've said a couple of times in this video, I do like it, and there are elements that are good about it for me. This is just my opinion, my perspective, and I can definitely be wrong about certain things, but this is how I feel about the movie after my one watch and just currently in this moment. I think anyone who can go out and put a movie together is amazing, and it's something I dream of doing one day myself. So regardless of whether or not I like or love or dislike or hate a film, for the most part, I always want to show appreciation for the ones who are out there just doing it. And that's a definite for Osgood Perkins in this film. And speaking of him, he already has a phenomenal horror under his belt with The Black Coat's Daughter. I'm still shook from when I first watched that. Completely different circumstances. I basically went in blind, but that movie was so perfectly creepy and scary, and I still remember it when I think back about horrors that I've watched over the years. And I know he put a lot of himself into this film as well, using various information and inspirations and even tapping into pieces of his own life to kind of build out what this film ends up becoming. And that effort and just the energy to do something meaningful to you and to create something like this is nothing short of amazing, because I know it's a big deal and it takes a lot and it's just a ton of work. And I just wanted to say, to kind of like wrap it a little bit, that I'm ultimately glad that this film exists. I'm not mad I saw it, and I definitely don't think it was a waste of time. And barring some of the other horrors yet to release this year, I'm thinking Cuckoo or Nosferatu or Alien Romulus, all of which I'm extremely excited about and looking forward to. But even with those, this could still be the best horror of the year if they don't pan out, or if we don't have like another sleeper pop out of the fray. I'd say so far this year, out of everything that's dropped in the genre, this is definitely the best. But we'll just have to see where it lands in the grand conversation of cinema. Has anyone out there seen Longlegs yet? If so, drop your thoughts on the movie down below and let me know what you think. I love a good healthy debate too, so even if you disagree with me, go for it and let's chat. I don't claim myself to be a complete authority on anything. These are just my takeaways and what I liked and didn't like from the film. It's been quite a mixed bag as far as ratings for this film, so I expect there could be some good back and forth in the comment section. So let's get it and go through it. If you're here at the end, thank you so much for watching and checking me out once again. Or if it's your first time, hey there, I'll say it again, Mars Hogan here. I don't have a special tagline quite yet, but I just talk movies and television and entertainment and whatever else around cinema. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully this video was a joy to watch and everyone will want to come back for what I have next. And go check out some of my other videos that are currently on the channel, including specifically my last video deep dive on Dune, which is a really interesting take and really close to what this video was. Anyways, thank you to all of you for watching. Please make sure you go comment and go subscribe if you like the content. It means so much. It makes a huge difference. I'm done yapping for now, but I'll see you all again soon. Not sure how soon, but at some point. Thank y'all again for watching. Have a good one and be well.